Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're continuing our exploration of modern Indian history.
A crucial subject for those of you prepping for the UPSC exams.
That's right. This deep dive is tailored specifically for the GS1 paper,
Focusing on the intricate story of Robert Clive.
even if you're not a UPSC aspirant.
Stick around if you're fascinated by the rise of British power in India.
Robert Clive's life is a fascinating study in ambition, military genius, and
The complexities of colonialism
he was celebrated for his victories,
that solidified British dominance in India,
but also...
heavily criticized for his role in the economic exploitation of Bengal.
Exactly. We've got battles, political intrigue.
And a glimpse into the economic transformation of Bengal.
It's going to be quite a ride.
So let's start with Clive's journey.
He arrives in India in 1744.
As a young East India Company clerk,
How does this seemingly ordinary clerk end up becoming Clive of India?
it's important to understand the context of the time.
Okay.
The Mughal Empire was in decline, creating a power vacuum that various regional powers and European trading companies were eager to fill.
I see.
Clive arrived amidst this volatile situation,
Right.
and his ambition and military talents quickly shone through.
His rise is marked by three pivotal battles. Plassey in 1757, Chinsura in 1759, and Buxar in 1764,
For our listeners,
especially those tackling the UPSC GS1.
understanding these battles is crucial,
Let's break them down.
starting with Plassey.
What made this battle so significant?
The Battle of Plassey wasn't just about military strength.
Okay.
It was a masterclass in political maneuvering.
Hmm.
Clive, realizing he was outnumbered by the Nawab of Bengal's forces,
Yeah.
secured the support of key figures within the Nawab's camp,
So he was outnumbered.
essentially turning the tide before the battle even began.
That's right. He managed to secure alliances with Mir Jafar.
One of the Nawab's commanders,
Right.
and influential bankers like Jagat Seth.
This strategic move neutralized a significant portion of the Nawab's army.
It's like a real-life game of chess, with Clive making calculated moves to outmaneuver his opponent.
Precisely. And the outcome of Plassey had a domino effect.
The victory led to the installation of Mir Jafar as a puppet ruler, giving the East India Company control over Bengal's vast wealth and resources.
Wow, so one battle dramatically shifted the balance of power in a crucial region.
But you mentioned two other battles, Chinsura and Buxar.
Let's talk about Chinsura next.
What happened there?
All right.
Chinsura in 1759 saw Clive facing the Dutch, who were another major European power vying for control in Bengal.
Okay.
The British emerged victorious, eliminating a significant rival and further consolidating their dominance.
So it wasn't just about defeating Indian rulers, but also about fending off competition from other European powers.
It paints a picture of a very volatile and complex political landscape,
Now let's move on to Buxar.
which you described as perhaps even more significant than Plassey.
Why is that?
Buxar, fought in 1764, saw Clive facing a formidable alliance. The Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, the Nawab of Awadh, and Mir Qasim.
The deposed Nawab of Bengal seeking revenge.
Despite being outnumbered,
Oh, wow.
the British, led by Hector Munro, won a decisive victory.
This victory against such a powerful alliance must have had enormous consequences.
Indeed.
Tell me more.
It shattered the alliance,
Right.
leading to the Mughal emperor's surrender to the British.
That's a powerful image of the shifting tides of power.
Absolutely.
It must have sent shockwaves to the entire subcontinent.
Buxar also brought Awadh under British influence,
I see.
and most importantly led to the company acquiring the Diwani rights.
For Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa.
Yes.
Okay, let's pause here for a moment.
Sure.
The term Diwani might need some clarification for our listeners.
Especially those new to this period of history.
Can you explain?
The Diwani essentially meant the right to collect taxes.
Okay.
Being granted the Diwani for such vast and wealthy territories transformed the East India Company.
So.
It shifted them from being primarily a trading entity to a de facto ruling power.
It's incredible how the outcome of these battles paved the way for British economic and political dominance.
So we have Robert Clive, the former clerk,
Now a military hero.
who has earned the title Clive of India.
But as you mentioned earlier,
His legacy is far from simple.
there's a darker side to his story, right?
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
While Clive's military and political achievements were undeniable,
Right.
his legacy is intertwined with the economic exploitation of Bengal. He implemented policies that prioritized profit over the well-being of the local population.
For example,
The company's aggressive push for cultivating cash crops like indigo and opium
okay.
led to a decline in food production and contributed to famines.
It's a crucial reminder that history is rarely black and white.
We need to examine both the triumphs and the darker aspects.
To understand the complexities of this period,
So while Clive was establishing British dominance,
he was also laying the groundwork for a system that would have devastating consequences for the people of Bengal.
exactly.
Now, amidst all this talk of battles and conquest,
I also read about Clive's attempts at reform in Bengal
he served as governor of Bengal twice.
and tried to address some of the issues within the company's administration.
What motivated him to pursue reforms?
Clive was deeply concerned about the rampant corruption within the East India Company.
Okay.
He witnessed firsthand how many officials were amassing fortunes through bribery, extortion, and illegal private trade.
So it wasn't just a case of the British exploiting India.
There was also a lot of internal exploitation happening within the company itself.
Clive saw this as a problem that needed to be tackled if the company was to effectively govern its expanding territories.
Precisely.
So tell me about these reforms.
Clive implemented a number of measures aimed at curbing this corruption.
Like what?
He cracked down on the misuse of dastaks.
Essentially, trade permits that were being used to facilitate illicit trade and avoid paying taxes.
He also attempted to regulate private trade,
Which was essentially company officials competing with the company itself, enriching themselves at its expense.
These dastaks sound like a loophole that was ripe for abuse.
They were, and Clive recognized that.
He understood that to bring order to the system, he needed to address these issues head-on.
So he comes across as a man who is deeply ambitious and driven,
But also aware of the need for structure and ethical conduct.
at least within the company's framework.
It seems like he was trying to impose a sense of order and accountability on a system that had become quite chaotic.
Yes, and his attempts at reform provide a fascinating glimpse into the internal workings of the East India Company.
And the challenges of governing a vast and complex territory like Bengal.
But as we'll see, these reforms weren't without their complexities and unintended consequences.
That's a great point.
It seems like every aspect of Clive's story is multi-layered and full of nuance.
It's not just about straightforward victories or clear-cut villains.
It's about understanding the complexities of colonialism
the ambitions and motivations of individuals.
and the unintended consequences of their actions.
Exactly.
And that's what makes studying this period so fascinating.
It challenges us to think critically about the past and grapple with its complexities.
This has been a great start to our deep dive into the life and legacy of Robert Clive.
We've covered a lot of ground, from his early days as a clerk to his pivotal role in battles that shaped the destiny of nations.
We've seen how he navigated the treacherous waters of Indian politics, implemented controversial reforms,
And ultimately left behind a legacy that is both celebrated and criticized. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and times of Robert Clive
Last time we left off with Clive's growing influence in Bengal.
and the East India Company's expanding power.
Now,
Let's take a closer look at the Battle of Plassey.
a turning point that's often mentioned in the UPSC GS1 syllabus.
That's right.
For our listeners prepping for the UPSC.
Understanding the nuances of Plassey is essential.
It wasn't just a clash of armies,
It was a culmination of political maneuvering, ambition,
and a keen understanding of the fragmented political landscape of 18th century India.
Exactly.
The Mughal Empire was in decline.
And regional powers were vying for control
Bengal
under Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowla.
was a particularly wealthy and strategically important region,
The East India Company
eager to expand its trade and influence.
found itself navigating a complex web of alliances and rivalries.
It wasn't as if the British just marched in and took over, right?
There was a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering.
And exploitation of existing tensions.
Absolutely.
And the events leading up to Plassey highlight this beautifully.
Siraj-ud-Dowla
Suspicious of the company's growing power,
and their fortifications in Calcutta.
took action.
This led to the infamous Black Hole of Calcutta incident in 1756.
Where a number of British officials and civilians were imprisoned in a small, overcrowded cell.
This incident
Even though its details and casualty figures are disputed by historians,
became a powerful symbol for the British
it fueled public outrage back in England.
and gave them a pretext for military intervention.
You're absolutely right.
It became a rallying cry
Justifying their actions.
and shaping public perception.
Clive
Already a rising military figure in the company,
was tasked with retaking Calcutta and restoring British prestige.
So he sets sail with his forces.
heading for a confrontation with Siraj-ud-Dowlah.
But what was Clive's strategy going into the Battle of Plassey?
He knew he was facing a larger army.
Was it simply a matter of military might?
Well,
Clive was a shrewd strategist.
okay.
He realized that a direct confrontation with the Nawab's forces was risky. Instead, he focused on exploiting existing divisions within the Nawab's camp
I see.
through a network of intermediaries
He secured the support of several key figures.
who were disgruntled with Siraj-ud-Dowlah's rule,
He managed to get wealthy bankers like Govt,
and powerful nobles like Mir Jafar,
the commander of the Nawab's army.
on his side.
This is a brilliant move.
It essentially neutralized a significant portion of the Nawab's forces.
Before the battle even began, this clandestine alliance building was a pivotal factor in the British victory.
On the battlefield of Plassey,
A large part of the Nawab's army remained inactive,
either due to their secret pact with Clive.
or their lack of confidence in the Nawab's leadership.
You're right.
The battle itself was relatively short,
Clive's force
utilizing superior artillery and tactics.
routed the remaining troops.
Siraj-ud-Dowlah fled.
That was captured and executed.
So the Battle of Plassey was a decisive victory for the British.
It solidified their position in Bengal.
But what were the long-term consequences of this event?
How did it contribute to British dominance in India?
Well,
The consequences were far-reaching.
okay, it established Mir Jafar
Clive's ally,
as the new Nawab of Bengal.
however,
He was essentially a puppet ruler.
beholden to the company's interests.
So the British didn't directly annex Bengal at this point,
They maintained a facade of indirect rule.
but they effectively had control over the region's administration and resources. This gave them access to Bengal's vast wealth.
Which they used to further their ambitions in India,
They secured lucrative trade concessions,
and acquired large tracts of land.
strengthening their economic hold.
The seeds of British economic dominance were sown here.
It's a clear illustration of how military victory translates into political and economic control.
Now, before we move on to Buxar,
Let's take a detour and revisit Clive's attempts at reform.
he was concerned about the rampant corruption within the company's ranks.
Yes.
And this concern is central to understanding his character and his approach to governance,
He was appalled by the behavior of many company officials.
who were enriching themselves through bribery, extortion, and private trade.
He saw this as a threat to the company's long-term stability and reputation.
So he wasn't just a conqueror focused on territorial expansion.
He also had a vision for how the company should govern its newly acquired territories.
Exactly.
And his vision included a more disciplined and ethical administration.
He introduced several measures aimed at curbing corruption.
He cracked down on the misuse of DAS,
Those trade permits we talked about earlier.
which were being used to evade taxes and facilitate illegal trade.
It seems like he was trying to plug the loopholes that were allowing company officials to exploit the system for personal gain.
He was
He also tried to regulate private trade
essentially preventing company servants from competing with the company itself.
and undermining its profits
He believed that employees should be adequately compensated.
to reduce the temptation for corrupt practices.
Interesting.
So he was trying to create a more transparent and accountable system.
But did these reforms succeed?
Were they genuinely aimed at improving the situation in Bengal?
That's a question that historians continue to debate.
Some argue that Clive's reforms were well-intentioned.
Aimed at establishing a more just and efficient administration,
Others see them as primarily serving British interests.
designed to consolidate their control and maximize profits.
What's undeniable is that he faced significant resistance from those who benefited from the existing corrupt system,
It's always challenging to implement change.
especially when it threatens the interests of powerful individuals.
But regardless of his motivations,
Clive's attempts at reform highlight the complexities and contradictions inherent in the colonial enterprise.
exactly,
And they raise crucial questions about the nature of power
the ethical dilemmas of colonialism.
and the impact of individual actions on a larger historical stage.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into the Battle of Plassey.
And Clive's attempts at reform.
We've seen how he used a combination of military strategy and political maneuvering to secure a pivotal victory for the British,
We've also explored the complexities of his reforms.
and the ongoing debate about their motivations and effectiveness.
Remember, for our UPSC aspirants,
Understanding these nuances is crucial for tackling the GS1 paper.
analyzing battles like Plassey
Understanding the motivations of key figures like Clive
and grasping the complexities of their actions and reforms.
is essential for success in your exams.
And for all our listeners,
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
We encourage you to delve deeper into the primary sources
Explore the different perspectives on this period.
and form your own informed opinions about this crucial era in Indian history.
In our next segment,
We'll be examining the Battle of Buxar
which further cemented British dominance in India.
and led to even more profound changes in the political and economic landscape,
We'll also delve into the darker aspects of Clive's legacy.
and the devastating impact of the company's policies on the people of Bengal.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
We're wrapping up our exploration of Robert Clive.
A figure who looms large in the history of British colonialism in India,
In the last part, we discussed the Battle of Plassey.
and some of the administrative challenges Clive faced,
Now let's shift our focus to the Battle of Buxar.
which had even more far-reaching consequences.
That's right. Buxar
Fought in 1764,
marked a turning point.
in the establishment of British dominance.
It solidified their control over a vast territory and really laid the groundwork for their transformation from a trading company to an imperial power,
For our listeners,
especially those preparing for the UPSC GS1 exam.
understanding the significance of Buxar is crucial.
What led to this clash?
Who are the key players involved?
After Plassey,
The East India Company's ambitions grew,
they were looking to expand their influence beyond Bengal.
and into the rich provinces of Bihar and Awadh.
This inevitably brought them into conflict with other powerful forces in the region.
So it wasn't just a straightforward conquest.
The British were operating within a complex political landscape.
Navigating alliances and rivalries.
Exactly.
At Buxar,
The company faced a formidable alliance,
the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II
seeking to regain some of his lost power.
had joined forces with the Nawab of Awadh
Shuja Udula,
and Mir Qasim,
the deposed Nawab of Bengal.
who was eager for revenge.
Wow, so the British were up against a coalition that included the Mughal emperor himself.
That must have been a daunting challenge.
It was,
Remember the Mughal emperor?
though in decline.
Still held symbolic authority over much of India.
His involvement in this alliance raised the stakes significantly.
It's a fascinating scenario.
The company driven by economic and political ambitions,
The Mughal emperor hoping to restore his influence?
and Mir Qasim seeking to reclaim his lost position.
What was the outcome of this epic clash?
The company's forces
Led by Hector Munro,
emerged victorious.
despite being outnumbered.
They used superior tactics and discipline to defeat the Allied armies.
This victory had profound consequences.
You're right.
This must be where the company truly solidifies its power in India.
The victory at Buxar shattered the alliance against the company,
Shah Alam II was forced to surrender.
becoming, for all intents and purposes, a pawn of the company.
This had enormous symbolic significance.
The Mughal emperor,
Who, in theory, was the supreme authority in India.
now under the control of a foreign trading company.
Talk about a shift in power dynamics.
It was a turning point,
Buxar also brought Awadh under British influence,
as the Nawab was forced to cede territory and pay heavy indemnities.
but perhaps most importantly,
The company secured the Diwani rights for Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa,
we talked about the Diwani earlier.
the right to collect taxes.
Acquiring these rights for such a vast and wealthy region must have been a game changer for the company.
It absolutely was.
Control over the revenue system provided them with immense economic and political leverage.
It essentially transformed them from a trading company into a de facto ruling power.
So Buxar wasn't just a military victory,
It was a crucial step in the company's evolution into a colonial empire.
and Robert Clive played a significant role in this process.
He did,
Clive returned to India in 1765
just before Buxar.
as a governor of Bengal for the second time,
He played a key role in negotiating the Treaty of Allahabad with the Mughal emperor.
securing those crucial Diwani rights,
So he was at the helm during this pivotal period.
shaping the company's policies and consolidating its gains.
Precisely.
But while Clive's military and administrative achievements are undeniable,
We also need to examine the darker side of his legacy.
that's right.
Earlier, we discussed his controversial attempts at reform.
But his legacy is also intertwined with the economic exploitation of Bengal,
Yes, and it's important for our listeners
especially UPSC aspirants,
to be able to analyze these complex legacies.
under Clive's governorship.
The company implemented policies that prioritized profit over the welfare of the local population.
It sounds like the focus shifted from trade to extraction of wealth.
Exact.
They imposed heavy taxes
Forced farmers to cultivate cash crops, like indigo and opium.
and established monopolies that stifled local trade.
These policies had devastating consequences.
These sound like policies that prioritize short-term profit.
over long-term sustainability and the well-being of the people.
What was the impact of these policies on the people of Bengal,
The emphasis on cash crops led to a decline in food production.
contributing to famines and widespread hardship,
The company's aggressive revenue collection practices further impoverished the peasantry.
leading to social unrest?
It's a stark reminder that the pursuit of wealth and power often comes at a human cost.
So Clive's legacy is a mixed bag.
On one hand, he's a brilliant military strategist and administrator who helped establish British dominance.
On the other hand,
He played a key role in creating a system that exploited and impoverished millions.
it's a paradox.
And it's why studying figures like Clive is so crucial,
It compels us to confront the complexities of history.
and to grapple with the ethical dilemmas of colonialism.
His story reminds us that even individuals celebrated as heroes can have a dark side.
And it's crucial for us to examine those complexities,
Not just for the sake of historical accuracy.
but also to understand how the past continues to shape the present.
What's fascinating here is that Clive's story encapsulates the broader themes of British colonialism: ambition, military prowess,
Political maneuvering, economic exploitation.
and the often unintended consequences of those actions.
It's a microcosm of the larger forces at play.
It's a reminder that history isn't just a collection of dates and battles,
It's about understanding the choices individuals make
the systems they create.
and the impact of those choices on the lives of countless people.
As we wrap up this deep dive,
I want to leave our listeners with a thought.
Clive's story raises crucial questions about the relationship between individual actions and historical forces.
Can one person truly shape the course of history, or are they simply swept along by larger currents?
That's a great question for our listeners to ponder.
And remember,
The study of history is not just about memorizing facts for exams,
it's about developing critical thinking skills
understanding cause and effect.
and learning from the past to navigate the complexities of the present.
And for our UPSC aspirants,
Remember that understanding figures like Clive,
their motivations,
their actions,
and their impact on India.
is crucial for success in the GS1 paper.
Analyze, contextualize, and form your own conclusions.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Robert Clive.
We hope you found it insightful and engaging.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into fascinating historical topics.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep questioning.